Good evening and welcome to the Healing Pearl Doctors Wellness Check-In. My name is Damon Pratt. I am your moderator for this evening. I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in Virginia, and I want to have our distinguished panel introduce themselves.
Thank you, Damon. I am Dr. Roselyn Aker-Black.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Sonya Clyburn.
And good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Cindy Dominique. I forgot my real name, right? Well, welcome to the Healing Pearl Doctors Wellness Check-In.
Good. Welcome. Thank you all. We're very pleased to have such a distinguished panel with us this evening. Just remember that what we're doing here tonight, our focus is on psychoeducation, just providing some resources for you. This is not treatment, what we're providing online. There will be some resources for you later that you can access to get treatment if you see fit. Cindy?
Well, I know a lot of people are wondering what's the difference between coaching and psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is where we provide interventions, we diagnose clients, we might have to hospitalize them and provide all the necessary resources for that individual. Whereas with coaching, the client takes ownership of their world and they're the expert of their lives. And we use the Socratic method to help the client figure out what's the next step. So it's kind of like a hands-off approach with coaching, whereas with psychotherapy, the psychologist, clinical social worker, or LCPC, we delve deeper, we provide interventions, and we diagnose.
Thank you, Cindy. Mm-hmm. So just as we move forward tonight, if you have questions, please put those in the chat and I will ask those questions to the panel. They will be able to answer in a round robin fashion. Ask whatever you feel need to ask. We're going to be very open and honest with what we do and don't know. So we're going to get going and I'm going to kick it off with a question for the panel. Okay. Recently, we've seen in the news two pretty high profile suicides. The first one was Regina King's son committed suicide not too long ago, and then the nephew of Venus and Serena Williams committed suicide more recently. So just for the panel, can you just discuss those a little bit for us and just how suicide is affecting the community, especially the Black community today?
Great question, Damon. And here's the truth. I think there was this myth that Black people do not commit suicide, but the truth of the matter is it is becoming prevalent and we are seeing it more and more, even with the former Miss America, even with her committing suicide, and everyone was like, she has everything. Why would she commit suicide? The truth of the matter is people really are suffering and they may not know how to get the help that they need. They may not understand what it looks like. And all they really know is that they want to stop the pain. Really. Cindy, Dr. Dominique, I'm sorry, you want to expand?
Sure. As Dr. Ross noted, being Black used to be a protective factor against suicide. That's no longer the case. And we're seeing a lot more African Americans and people of color engaging in that act. And as Dr. Ross noted, it is about trying to stop the pain that I'm feeling. And the majority of people who commit suicide, they probably have a mental health illness or disorder. However, everyone who has a mental illness or a diagnosis, they're not suicidal. So I want to be clear about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just to add, I think this suicidality is a public health problem. And in order to really delve into it, one, we have to understand the language. Language matters. Instead of saying committed suicide, we should say completed suicide. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then moving further, we need to normalize having conversations in our communities about mental health. When we are doing that, it provides people a safe place or knowing that I deserve to be heard or my feelings matter, right? When we stop having these conversations or don't have those conversations, individuals will tend to internalize their feelings and not feel as though they can get help. And so as we know with suicidality, the feeling of hopelessness is the number one criteria. Hopelessness and helplessness. So we need to have perceived support for those individuals because we also know as clinicians, having perceived support is better than no support at all. When someone feels as though they have support, they may not do certain things to themselves.
Piggybacking on that, just wanted to ask, well, one comment when you're talking about language, one thing that gets to me is when we hear people say successful suicide, which I never liked, because there's nothing that's not a success.
Right.
So, I mean, when we're talking about normalizing language, that's important, that for one, we're all speaking the same language, and we're speaking the appropriate language to make people feel supported and comforted as they're dealing with these things. But one thing I wanted to ask to the panel is, what can people look for? What type of signs can they look for when people might be going through something?
I think one of the key factors is going to be like what Dr. Sonya mentioned, the whole helplessness, the whole hopelessness, the isolation, withdrawing. If you notice that maybe your child was an extrovert, and then suddenly their behavior changed, it's worth investigating. And I want to add this, that bringing up the conversation of, I've had a lot of parents say, I don't want to talk to my child about suicide because I don't want to put the thought in their mind. And as Dr. Sonya was saying, it's better to have that conversation. So if your child is having those suicidal ideations, then they know that they can come to you, and it's not something that's going to scare you as a parent. And so you create that safe space of talking about it so that they know that there is a lifeline.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Dominique.
Thank you. And in addition, a lot of times we don't even talk about death. And death is actually a social issue. Because as soon as we're born, we start dying, and we talk about birthdays, we talk about celebration of life, but we don't talk about death. And it is part of the life stage. And suicide is a manner in which people engage in ending their lives. So if we don't talk about death, and we're not talking about suicide, and it's all interrelated and correlated.
Mm-hmm. And just to note some of the symptoms, the behavioral symptoms are important, but the psychological symptoms are also important. So they may have depression, anxiety. Individuals may have a loss of reality.
Yes.
They may be impulsive in terms of using substances, or in terms of music that they listen to. It may have changed, right? They may also be withdrawn, isolated. There are so many different symptoms, because it's overarching, but it's unique to the individual. So the person, say for instance, may give away some of their prized possessions.
Absolutely.
Right? That could be a sign, right? So when we think about suicidality, we have to think about the passivity of it, and then the active phase of it. Because some people may say, well, it's normal for me to think about not being here. But then we need to have more discussions about what does that look like for the person, versus someone saying, you know what, I really want to harm myself. And then the next steps.
And it's about probing, like Dr. Sonya said, probing further. Okay, what does that look like for you? And if we have some type of relationship with the client, then that would help us as well, because the therapeutic alliance is important when we're talking about suicidality and the growth and moving this individual to another place, from thinking about hurting themselves, moving away from hurting themselves towards being future oriented and staying here. In addition, another risk factor is their criteria, sleep and appetite. And we often forget about that. If the person hasn't been sleeping, that could be a disturbance in reality and then make them think something else. So those two things, those are the things that I look for more likely, is the appetite and sleep disturbances.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Dr. Cindy. But you have to think too, many people aren't coming to get services, right? And so I think, again, from a social construct, we all need to pay attention.
Yes.
If we see something, we have to do something. Everyone needs to have some mental health literacy on some level, Okay, because mental health is weighted just like physical health.
Absolutely.
Mental health can kill you. And once people have that understanding, it's not, oh, I just talked to a therapist or I just feel blue. No, you have to think about the symptoms, the duration of those symptoms, the impact that it's having on your functioning, you know. And so if family members or friends are seeing these types of things, you have to make a referral. You need to make a recommendation for your loved one. And that's important.
And can I add this too? Because we hear it in our community the whole time, all the time. Got to be a strong Black woman. Y'all, that mantra is going to kill us.
Yes.
It is going to kill us. Hear me when I say that. Like, there are things that will be overwhelming. And so we need you need to know that there are resources out there that can help you. And if you feel some kind of way about something that has happened in your life, do not be afraid to reach out. Do not be afraid to get into services. And it does not mean that you're weak. It does not mean that you can't handle the situation, because oftentimes people are so confused when they see someone that they think is high functioning commit suicide, right? And so that was the case with the former Miss America. People were like, she's very high functioning. She's an attorney. She's got a job on TV. But if we subscribe to that I'm a strong Black woman mantra, then sometimes we don't recognize that we may need to get help.
Yeah.
And the same with men. It does not mean for you to, I think the bravest thing you can do for yourself is to get help. That's the bravest thing that you can do for yourself.
I totally agree. And I think too, what does normalcy look like? I mean, when you define it, it's so ambiguous. It's based upon norms. It's based upon so many things. And I think when we're looking at mental health, there are norms, there are deviants, there's danger to self and dysfunction. All of those things plays a role in how we are seeing people. And another thing that I wanted to add is that many times people will go to their ministers, go to the stylists, go to their friends. All that's good, right? However, there's a line. There's a line where one should cross and refer. Now, you have ministers who are doing an exceptional job. I know many that are doing exceptional jobs relating to mental health and providing help for their individuals and the parishioners, and stylists. But they're not, that's just one tier. Seek a professional.
Definitely. Now, one thing you touched on a little bit, and it's funny, I think you all were reading my notes because everything that I jotted down, you touched on already. But we've talked a lot over the years about just the stigma around mental health in general, and especially in the Black community. Just we talked about it. It's not being weak, not being seen as weak to ask for help, and just it's how important it is to create a safe space in our communities and our neighborhoods where people can ask for help and seek assistance without being ridiculed, put down, because there's so many times where I've seen where people have kept it to themselves because I didn't want to disappoint someone. I didn't want them looking at me. I didn't want them calling me names. So, how do we continue that push to change that stigma? Like I said, we've been talking about that for so long now, changing the stigma, but how do we continue that push to normalize asking for help and not being seen as weakness when you're asking for help?
By having conversations like this and educating our community and making people aware, like we have to stop being afraid to have the conversation, because at the end of the day, everybody has had someone in their family where they're like, that's cousin Pete, he crazy. Well, what does that mean? Like, what you mean cousin Pete is crazy? Like, what's wrong with him? Let's have a conversation about what's wrong with him and can we get him help? Everybody has someone in their family like that. And I think we're just so used to pushing people to the back room in our family because we're embarrassed by their behavior. We're embarrassed by how they show up. If they're disheveled, they're unpredictable. We don't know what they're going to do. But we have to create these safe spaces like this, have the conversation, educate the community, and have a very real conversation about what it looks like and what we need to do. I think the problem is some people don't know what it looks like. People don't know what mental health looks like, because we're just so, in our community, we're just so quick to say, she crazy, that's how she is. And we brush things off. And we don't try to delve in to figure out, like, what is that? What is the crazy? Like, what is that? So I think having conversations like this is a great step forward in terms of trying to educate the community, of trying to break that stigma, of trying to provide access to our community, because guess what? They may not be able to provide or afford therapy. But everybody's on Facebook, so you can watch a Facebook Live. Everybody's on YouTube. Everybody's got a smartphone. You can watch this for free. So having resources like this, doing things of this nature, we hope, which is why we started the Healing Pearl Doctors, that we start breaking down those stigmas and providing access and resources to our people.
And Dr. Ron, I would also say to model the behavior. Even though I'm a psychologist, I went to therapy. And when I started going to therapy, my family members thought I was a little strange. Cindy, why are you doing that? Because I need the support. And I still go. And even with my present clients, I inform them, yes, I've been to therapy. I have a diagnosis. I've been on psychotropic meds. It's important. And so I have to practice what I preach. And if I'm modeling the behavior, then it lets people know that, yeah, if she's a therapist and she has her own therapist, that's actually good. So I want people to see that it really is the best thing that you can do for yourself. And the phrase right now, living my best life or being the best version of me. Well, you do that when you take care of your mental health and your physical health.
Mm-hmm. And to that end, I think many times the stigma comes in from just the trauma, the whole element of people not trusting the system.
Absolutely.
And when they don't feel as though they're going to trust the system, they're not going to seek support. But what I will say this is that there are people out here that they can trust, who look like them, who want to provide services, and will give pro bono services or a sliding fee schedule payments for them. I think one of the things that we have to know as the energy of the world is shifting. You think about COVID, that's a transformation. It was a shift.
Absolutely.
This is the time for shift. This is a time for transformation. This is a time for healing, And so, one, we have to understand that we deserve this. Our counterparts have been doing therapy for centuries, for decades. We have to have an understanding that we deserve it too. We deserve to heal. The healing, our trauma does not represent us.
And you just mentioned something important that I want to pivot a little bit with when you mentioned the pandemic and dealing with COVID and everything that's going on in the world today. And if you all could talk a little bit about just how the changes over the last couple of years are affecting our personal well-being, our mental health, our spiritual well-being, those things, just because of the way the world is now.
Well, just by being Black, we pay a tax every single day.
Yeah.
And on top of that tax, you see the things that are happening. Mm-hmm. And I had a client, she couldn't stop crying because of what was happening with George Floyd and all the death. And she's like, I can't take it anymore. The weight is too heavy for me. And so we have to think about some things. I don't want you watching the news. I don't want you to listen to this. You have to protect your mental space. So if that means you're watching Netflix and comedy and funny things, completely disconnect, because we are too connected. And every single day, just being a person of color, being a Black woman, people see you as a threat no matter what. And we're dealing with the trauma of slavery. We're dealing with the trauma of being Black Americans or just people who are non-white in the United States. And then you go global and it's the same thing. So wherever we go, we're treated and we're looked upon differently and we're a threat. And so that impacts you day in and day out. And you don't feel safe. And so if you don't even feel safe in your being, then how can you, there's there's just a level there that everybody is walking around with trauma. And then you take into consideration being living in the inner city. That's another level of trauma. So COVID opened the doors where I think it allowed people to see the experiences that we have, but at the same token, it kind of isolated us to some degree as well.
And the truth of the matter is, I think when we had the shutdown, we had the opportunity to realize how much we assimilate for society. And so being at home gave us the opportunity to be ourselves, gave us the opportunity to not have to show up, right? To not have to be this person at work. At home, we were able to take it off, right? And so a lot of people have a lot of anxiety about going back because they don't want to be that person again, which is why we have the great resignation that's going on right now. People are like, I'd rather quit my job than have to feel like I have to be this person again. It's not good for me. And I recognize since I've been home for these 18 months that it's not good for me.
Yeah, I totally agree with my colleagues. I think with the pandemic, it was an intersectionality with COVID and social justice one, which kind of perplexed the exacerbation of anxiety and depression and identification, how you identify what's going on with me. When people were the first year in COVID, so many people were anxious and they were depressed and they couldn't know, they had family issues. They had never been in this household for that long period of time with their family members. So all of those things kind of definitely had an impact on people, their value system, how they see themselves, what are things that they need to work on, because once you sit in the house for a long period of time, stuff start coming up. And so they had to face things. And so I think that was one of the psychological residues of COVID.
One thing that I've said a lot is COVID forced us to sit with our choices, sit with our decisions. And I don't know who I heard that from, but I love it because there were things that we have been doing before that point that we didn't have to look at because we were leaving the house every day. It would have been that spouse that I realize now I don't really like this person. Or I don't like myself because I'm distracted at work all day. But you see so many couples, they're used to seeing each other for an hour in the morning, 2 or 3 hours in the evening, and some on the weekend. Now, if you're together all day, a whole litany of issues are starting to pop up, and it's causing stress on our families. We got a question in that line from Takesha. She was asking about how the pandemic has affected individuals, and she wanted to hear about how their thoughts on the increase in anxiety, depression, and suicide among youth who witnessed an increase in domestic violence during the pandemic. I know I personally have seen a great increase in domestic violence in my work. I work for the military. So a lot of these, I work for the Navy. So a lot of these sailors have been sitting at home and not on the ship as much. And our domestic violence cases have skyrocketed during this time. And you're staying busy because a lot of people come into the military anyway because they want to get fixed in some way. And now they're sitting at home with their spouses, with their kids. Domestic violence is on the rise. Sexual assault is on the rise. All of these things are on the rise. So, Pat, how can you all just talk a little bit about that for Takesha?
Great question, Dr. Takesha. She just graduated with her doctorate in clinical psychology. So,
congratulations!
Congratulations, and welcome to the 1% Club. That's a great question because it did increase. When we first shut down, we were in another pandemic with domestic violence. And primarily what Damon mentioned is that people were stuck in the house. You couldn't go anywhere. If you had an outlet, your outlet was closed. So if your outlet was going to the club, now you can't go to the club. Now you can't go to brunch with your girlfriends. You can't do any of those things because we were in this pandemic and everything was closed. So people were not able to modulate their emotions and their aggressive behavior, whereas they had outlets before. So yeah, absolutely, there was a significant increase in terms of domestic violence, in terms of the anxiety and the depression, because you felt it brought on a feeling of helplessness, and then we were scared.
Mhm.
We were scared, guys. We didn't know what COVID was. We thought that if you went outside, you were gonna die. Like that was like the trending thing. Like this thing is gonna kill you if you touch this, if you do this and you do that. You know, you thought you were gonna die. So it was a very scary time. And for people who did not know how to manage their emotions, being fearful,
Mhm.
being stuck, feeling like you don't have an outlet,
Mhm.
they began to suffocate and they began to unravel and they couldn't control their environment. When we first got shut down, what was that, March 2020?
Mhm.
Like none of us knew what to do. We were afraid we wouldn't be able to get food. I just remember all the crazy reports that we had.
It was
It was a lot going on.
it was a lot of fear of the unknown. How am I
Mhm.
gonna pay for my kids? You know, I have to go to work, but then my kids have to go to school and they're doing school virtually. I can't be at work and do this and then I can't focus. It was the combustible environment, and it put everybody on edge on top of all the other things that were happening. And as Dr. Sonia noted, it was transformational because
Mhm.
it brought everyone to this place. The world basically shut down.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
I just have three words: coping, power, and control.
Yeah.
Those three things were limitless. The people didn't there was no opportunity for control because again, we didn't know. We became unknown of what's happening, what was the next week situation. We didn't have the power to govern our lives. The government was telling us what to do and what we could and could not do for the protection of our families. And then our coping strategies, the things that we, like Dr. Ross said, the things that we previously done, we couldn't do those things any longer. We had to come up with different things to occupy our time and our mental space.
Mhm, 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 mhm.
One thing with living during this time, it's when you're constantly living in fear. Of course, that's traumatic to the body.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're adding constant fear from COVID, constant fear from racism in our society, constant fear of employment, all of these things that we're constantly having to deal with during this time, it's just trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma for us as Black people who we have trauma in our DNA. It's ingrained in us from the beginning. But one good thing about us is that resiliency is in our DNA too. We have been able to push through over these years more than, I don't care what anybody says, any other group of people in this world. We have had to push through traumatic events and show our resiliency to move on. And it's just, if you can talk about just how to be resilient through these times, through the way the world is, with everything that's going on. How do you build your resiliency, and what does a resilient person look like during this time?
Great question. Great question,
Mhm.
Damon. And for me, I think it's you can't try to worry about what you can't control. Once you let that go, and once you look at the core thought of something, for me, because that core thought is driving your emotions about it and it's driving your behavior. It's influencing the two of those things. So whatever that core thought is, so if you are waking up thinking the whole world's falling apart, or I've really screwed up, I'm incompetent, I'm this, I'm that, that core thought is going to affect how you feel and it's going to affect your behavior. So what you have to do is that you have to evaluate that core thought. Is it true? Where is the evidence? Because what we know, feelings are not facts, right? So we feel all kinds of ways because our feelings are not stable, but are they? They're not fact either. And so you, as an individual, you have the opportunity, because you know yourself best. You have the opportunity to look at, to see if that is, if the evidence of what you're thinking about yourself, about that thought, is that true about you? And if you don't have evidence to back that up, then you know that you can stop that negative thought. You can move past that negative thought. And once you move past that negative thought, it's going to alleviate that negative feeling and it's going to alleviate that negative behavior. So really, I encourage people to start with your thought process. What does your thought life look like in terms of trying to get to a resilient place,
And
managing those negative thoughts?
as Damon noted, we're all resilient. We have our own internal resilience and we have external resilience. You know, some people like to garden. That helps them to release the anxiety. What are the things that you've done all along? What are your support systems that have helped you and that have held you along throughout your lifetime? Those are the things that you go back to when you're stressed and we're pressing out of the scenes or pushing out of the scenes. That's what we have to think about. You know, exercise is a great way to um, build your resilience. There's so many different things, and it's individualized for that person. So cooking could be a resilient factor for people, and sharing that, and it's the sense of community. Connection and community really help with resilience.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a hard agree with me. But I think one of the things too, African American people, we're a stolen people, but we're not conquered people, right? I always like to say that. And so when you're thinking about trauma responses, it's about adaptation and about assimilation. So you asked me or us about resiliency. We have resiliency, but it's about post-traumatic growth. How are we growing through it? Right? So it's not just what happened, but our awareness of what happened, the acceptance of what happened, and then the adaptation. So what are we going to do? What is the meaning behind it all? How are we going to transcend? What are the meanings about our lives? What is the purpose of our lives? How are our connections with people? So I just wanted to add that piece because a trauma response is adaptation and assimilation. So which one are we going to do?
Definitely. Let me ask, just for you all on a personal note, what have you done during this time over the last 18 months or so to help you grow through this process and continue just maintaining your mental health doing all of this?
I think I became more creative. I tried to think of different things out of the box, things that I didn't have the opportunity before because we were going to work, to explore things that I like. I mean, I probably drove my husband crazy because I was doing little paintings here at the house. Probably drove him out of his mind with the paintings or whatever. But I tapped into my creativity, and that has been sustaining me a bit. Like, what more can I do? What more programs can I offer? How can I make something impactful? So I tapped into that for myself.
Well, I'm going to be honest. Besides eating, because I gained a lot of weight during COVID. Okay. But, during this time, I did a lot of, well, one, I developed a curriculum for trauma in the African American community. So I think my creative juices was definitely on a high. I did a lot of research and reading and meditation. Meditation has become my best friend during this time. Just really hearing and seeing what the creator is having in stored for me. So I think when you're thinking about mental health, right, that spiritual component is important.
Absolutely.
And saying spiritual component, I'm not speaking about religion. I'm speaking about your connection to the higher being, what that looks like for you. And then taking the time to slow down and to listen and to pause and do some soulful things like eating properly, which I just told you. My chocolate chip cookies were the thing for me. I have stopped eating as much as I could, but just really thinking about what kind of foods are you eating, exercising, like right now, that's very important.
For me, my dog, he's been the blessing that I didn't know that I needed in more ways than one. He keeps me on my toes. So I have to walk him 2 or 3 times a day, so that's exercise for me.
Mhm.
As Dr. Sonya said, I eat pizza on a regular basis, but you don't see the bottom half of me, so that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Also connecting, that's been the core. My sorority sisters, my line sisters, and I, we're on a group chat and we're connected on a daily basis. They keep me energized, my friends, my family. Listening to music, I'll dance in the mirror and act like I'm Beyonce on the stage doing something, and I have this whole people, but that's just how I do it. And then just I actually started my business during COVID.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
That's good, Cindy.
I've been blessed beyond comparison because I was so scared. I'm like, am I gonna make enough to live? And God worked it out for me to have that thought to pre-plan before COVID. And April 2020 is when I started my business. And by the grace of God, I've been able to keep moving and eat, and able to travel.
That's,
Yeah, that's the drug, traveling.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I think too that we should add humor too,
Yeah.
because I think that's laughing is such a beautiful thing. It cures so much. And I think during COVID, I laughed a lot,
Yeah.
even
So
despite my sadness in
Yeah.
certain ways.
I'm actually 77 years old.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's because I laugh a whole lot. So you too can look like me. Keep laughing. Yes. Show all the
Thank
time.
you so
So you can
much.
look like this at 77.
I also allowed myself to rest.
Yes.
My life before COVID
Mm,
was ridiculous.
mhm.
I've gotten a taste of sitting in the house and chilling, and that was my best friend. So
Mhm.
I have allowed myself to rest, and I didn't know that life before because I was on the go, on the go, on the go. We're all members of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and I was very active in my chapter. And so to have a moment where I wasn't running to do community service, leaving my house, fighting traffic to get into DC. I'm in a DC chapter. To get into DC to do traffic, to do community service was a blessing. Being able to do things online was a blessing. Like I wouldn't have my camera on sometimes. And that was great for my mental health because that means I ain't got to put on makeup. I ain't got to comb my hair. Like I don't have to do all of those things. So it was wonderful for me and great for my mental health. And I needed COVID. COVID was a blessing and a curse because we were losing people, but it was a blessing for me because it gave me the opportunity to rest and not hear people like, Roz, you comment, Roz, where you at? I mean, I'm a social butterfly. I like to be out and about, but in COVID, I have retired. Don't hold me to that, but I've retired a little bit, and I'm not mad at it.
As Dr. Sonia noted, it's about transformational growth as well. It's connected us in so many different ways. And when I'm COVID was a blessing, but it's also a curse, and it is a blessing in disguise. And I'm grateful that it put me in this position that I'm able to grow.
Mhm.
One thing is, I guess it's Takesha saying, do what makes you feel good and pouring into your own cup. And I think that is important. It's our resilience, our ability to push through and persevere and grow is very individualized. So we have to know, and this pandemic has allowed us to look internally and see what it is that truly makes us happy and have the opportunity to explore those things. For some, it's just getting a good night's sleep when you haven't gotten one in 10 years.
Yeah.
Not having to get up. I'm at work at 6:30 in the morning right now, and I'm not teleworking anymore. But when I was teleworking, it was heaven. But I got caught up on some rest. So finding what works for you and helping get yourself to that good place. Now, Mia asked, what strategies would you offer to people who are struggling to find their footing in the world as the world begins to open back up?
That's a great question. And another new doctor, Dr. Mia Alexander, congratulations. She just got her doctorate too.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's a great question because people don't want to go out. People would rather just stay in the house. And when I say people, I'm people. Like I don't want to have to interact in the world, which is odd for me because I love people, but I don't want to have to go out. And when I have had to go out, when I do go out, I make it an effort that I still feel protected. So I do the things that are necessary. Like I don't leave without antibacterial wipes. I have like 5 masks just in case I put my mask down and I don't put it down the correct way. And I don't know, like those were the things that used to stress me out. Like did I put the mask, the part that goes over my nose, did I put that on the right surface? Like those are things that used to stress me out when I was going out. But now I'm like, as long as I have my hand sanitizer and I have my mask and I have my mask, my hand sanitizer and my mask, I feel somewhat okay. And I say that just not getting over COVID. I got COVID at the beginning of the year, which I was very surprised because I try to be very, very careful while I'm out. And what I learned about this, I was about to say Omarion, I'm sorry, about this Omicron variant is that it stays on surfaces longer. So that's why it's so transmissible. So being able to just do a little research around it made me feel a little bit more comfortable about being back out in the world. Um, Thankfully, I haven't had to go out and go back to work. Praise the Lord for that. Because I don't think I want to do that. I don't think I want to be around people like that. I've gotten very comfortable with being home in my yoga pants and looking crazy. I'm very comfortable with that. So, one strategy that I know I said a lot to get to this. One strategy I would use, Dr. Mia, is that I would look at opportunities of where you can. I don't want to say I don't want to say to keep you recluse, but you can pick and choose where you want to go now. Like you don't have to attend everything. And like that's one thing I'm telling myself, like I ain't gotta go to everything. So you can pick and choose to go to smaller, intimate things. You can pick and choose what it is that you can go to now. You don't have to be at everything. That's one thing I would say.
I have a lot of friends who are teachers or work in the school system, and I also have clients who work in the school system, and it's been difficult for them because it was anxiety, knowing that they would have to go back into the system, and the kids hadn't been vaccinated, and the kids weren't wearing masks, so it was like a catch-22 because they need to work to feed their families, but at the same token, they don't want to put their families at risk because it is scary.
Yeah.
And COVID has different responses to everybody. What happens to one person may not happen to somebody else. So with that, there have been a lot of discussion about anxiety. Will I be safe? And just because the governor or the mayor says don't do it doesn't mean that I can't protect myself. So it really is a lot of anxiety. But talking to your colleagues and having a game plan that helps out to minimize the anxiety related to going back into the office. And if you're teleworking and you're doing a how do you call it when they change up the telework desk, make sure you clean your stuff and have the wipes, the I'm in my office, but I always have the Clorox wipes, all to yourself, wear gloves, universal precautions, no matter who it is, universal precautions.
Yeah. When I think about anxiety, I think about three things. I think about worry, threat, and fear.
Mhm.
So, what can you do about those things based upon your engagement? So, the strategies that I would suggest was one, just taking it slow, ease into it, getting your footing, right? Don't rush into anything. Think about it. Think about your safety, the safety of your family members. You may have to put some boundaries out, some hard pressed boundaries about how you show up, how long you show up, or if you show up at all, right? So you just negotiating with yourself about, what's important to you and important to your family. So those three things, anxiety, threat, and worry. One, certain things you can control, things you can't control, and seeing out of those three, what are those things within those three components, how you can deal with it.
And Dr. Sonya, you just reminded me of the serenity prayer.
Mm.
Mhm,
God grant me
mhm.
the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Because it's about things that you can and cannot control.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's important that when you're using that wisdom piece is important, because you have to do what works for you,
Mm-hmm.
what's best for you, and we can't feel the pressure that a lot of people felt. Like I'm an introverted person, so I thought being locked in was going to be great, and it was for a little while.
Mhm.
Then I decided this is getting on my nerves. I need to see somebody. Luckily, I live alone, so luckily I had my kids that I could see that helped break things up. But for so many people, they were locked in for a while, and then when they got a little peak of freedom, they went completely the opposite direction, and they went outside doing everything. And you see places like in Atlanta and places where there's always a video of somebody having a party with 200 people in there, shoulder to shoulder, and then the next thing you hear is like there's 50 people that tested positive for COVID.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very serious. It's important that we do, like I said, what works best for us, because we still don't know the long-term effects of this sickness.
That's right.
Right.
I caught it in December, and I'm still having effects today.
Me too.
I still can't smell everything.
Mm.
I can't smell most things still to this day, which has me scared all the time. I'm always cleaning. I'm always spraying because I don't want to miss something, and then somebody come over and like, what are you doing? But that's just a mild symptom, and others have had much worse symptoms. So it's still going to be about doing what's best for you and your personal safety, and that's what your mental health.
I will say this. Now that I've gotten through COVID, I'm not as afraid anymore as I was. I mean, because when COVID first hit, y'all, I was horrible. I was checking my temperature every single day, like I was a hot mess. I was checking my temperature, like, because to me that was quelling my anxiety. Because transparent moment here, I can get anxious about a whole lot of stuff. So when I don't know what's going on, I have to figure it out. So I have to have a plan, right? My plan was if my temperature is okay, then I know I'm okay. That was the story I was telling myself. And this is before we had the vaccine and things of that nature. So when I got vaccinated, as you were saying, Damon, the extrovert in me was like, I got to get out. I can get out now. But then I'm not going to say I was reckless when I was out, but they said that we didn't have to wear a mask if we were vaccinated. So there were so many times that I could have caught it before I caught it this last time, and I got it in December too. There were so many times that I could have caught it, and I didn't, by the grace of God. Thank you, Jesus. But you're right. I don't know. What terrifies me is the long-term effects. Dr. Cindy and Dr. Sonya would tell you I was a coughing fool, like could barely talk. We would have our meetings, and I'm like, y'all, I'm so sorry. I can't. It's an uncontrollable cough that you can't even imagine. And the headaches, that COVID headache was the worst. I literally was in the fetal position, crying for my mama at 40-something years old. Yeah, the COVID headache was kicking my tail. So, but once I got through it, now I'm not. Since I know I've survived it, I'm not as terrified about it. And it's not that I'm less. It's not that I don't wear my mask. I still wear my mask. I still have my hand sanitizer and all that good stuff. I'm just not as terrified as I was about it.
Yeah, it's important to not operate in fear.
Yeah.
I mean, because we can still go back to us as a people, and we've had to operate in fear so much throughout our life, and this is just one more piece of fear, one more layer of fear placed on us. But as we have talked about, we get through, we push through, and we grow through these things. I've seen so many examples of people that used this, like Dr. Cindy did. She started her private practice during this time, and so many people have grown so much during this time, starting businesses, starting new endeavors, developing programs, whatever they needed to do. And that's just such a big thing. You've got this mess that's going on. We got to find something positive in it to pull out of it to add to our personal growth. And that's what I take from this. It's been an opportunity to look within and to grow, you know, on whatever level, whatever plane we're growing on. That's just, if we can come out of it having grown some, that's important. And not everybody had to start a new business, because at one point it was like, everybody, all this time, you should start a new business during this time. If it's right for you, you start it.
Yeah.
You grow the way that's right for you. And I think it's a huge takeaway from this time.
Yeah, that's that post-traumatic growth I was speaking about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So important. So good. We wanted to see the in the chat. Feel free to come on and add some more questions as we are approaching the top of the hour. We want to make sure that we are addressing whatever questions, concerns you might have before we do end up, in the next 10 minutes here. So we don't want to miss out on anything. And just also a reminder, we will be posting some resources for you to take away at the end. They will be in the chat for you once we can get those in there. So for the panel, then tell me, as we move forward in society, what do you see as, I guess, the next wave, the next big growth or hurdle for us as people as we move forward, a direction for us to go as we're working on our personal growth?
Mindset, because all of us have dreams, but something has happened that's knocked us off our square, right? And so that sets that trauma in, right? Like, so I knew this wasn't for me, because if this was for me, it wouldn't be this hard. So we start telling ourselves these stories that are not true. Everybody is going to have, some trials, but that your trials don't determine who you can ultimately be, right? And so I think if we get into a space, and certainly talking about the trauma of Black people, right? The trauma of Black women, the trauma of Black men, if we get into a space where we truly believe that we can do what it is that we want to do, and stop the negative thinking and stop the negative thoughts that stop us. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. So literally just changing our mindset about how we see things, because sometimes we're the only ones that's holding ourselves back, the stories we tell ourselves. So I just want to encourage people to stop telling yourself these stories that are not true about who you are.
Definitely. And we got a question from Charmaine. And I don't know, is she a new doctor also?
I don't know.
We welcome it.
I don't know.
I need to go back to school. And and she says, do you have any recommendations for school teams who are working with students who return to school with social and emotional needs?
Oh, that's a great question. I founded a nonprofit organization where we work with at-risk middle school girls. So they're already coming to the table with their own behavioral and emotional needs. And so things that we've done for them is that we've tapped into their creativity, and just showing them, like we do. I'm so proud of our girls, y'all. I'm so proud of our girls. They just published their first affirmation journal on Amazon. So you guys can go on Amazon and look for Gold Grinders, and you'll see their affirmation journal. And so the completion of that, they were so excited about it. And they're like, I'm an author. Like, so to see that they could do something as a kid, right? With the right guidance as a parent. So Charmaine, if you're running a program, it didn't cost us anything to do this journal. We developed the journal in Canva, canva.com, and then we uploaded it to KDP for free. So tapping into things like that, tapping into their talents, tapping into their creativity, or just showing them that that it's possible for them to do things, it changes their whole mindset. And it helps out with those social and emotional needs.
And if I could add, I think it's important. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Ross.
No, I was just gonna say, I was just gonna say that our girls, when we were not in COVID, we were meeting at a school in Gaithersburg, Maryland. But since we've had to go virtual, so our girls are at different schools, and so it's so they don't go to school together. The only time that they really meet and they become friends is when they come to our after school program. And so just I tell people don't sleep on after school programs because a lot of beautiful friendships can occur in after school programs. These girls have built their own business. They have a t-shirt line. They have the journal. They're working on mugs. They're working on all kinds of things. And they weren't friends at first. And so being able to pull them together virtually, they've had the opportunity to see what they can do. And that it can be done virtually with the right guidance.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the things, as you were speaking, Dr. Ross, I was thinking about from a structure standpoint and then from a deliveral standpoint. So structurally, do you have people in place to recognize social and emotional needs?
Mm.
Are they equipped? Are they aware? Because behavior speaks to about children. You know, are we pathologizing our children? Are we saying, okay, oh, he's acting this way. Maybe he didn't eat today. Maybe he needs a hug, or maybe he needs sleep because he had to stay up all night because he was fearful that his dad or somebody was going to beat up his mom. I'm just giving that as an example. But then the deliverables are, yeah, creative ways, right? Are you training the staff? Are you training the students? Meaning, do some meditation groups.
Yes.
You know,
Mindfulness.
yeah, mindfulness, meditation groups,
Yoga.
creative activities, looking at connections with each other, looking at, you know, Afrocentricity, what it means to be a Black young prince and a young Black princess. All of those things matter because we're thinking about molding our children to have an understanding and acceptance of who they are, like the empowerment piece. And it's critical, particularly with the younger children. You know, they may not have had individuals to give them that support and love. So I know many times, and shout out to all the teachers and staff at schools and educators. Oh my goodness, you all don't get enough. But I think those are some things I would recommend.
Yeah. And to your point, Sonya, train your staff on mindfulness. I know one of the things, and sometimes it's just so great to have people of color, right, who work on the administrative staff because they, as you were saying, Dr. Sonya, they see things from a very different lens.
Absolutely.
They understand the trauma that our babies may be dealing with. So no, little Junebug is not acting a fool because he doesn't want to learn. Little Junebug is hungry. He's worried about, I don't mean to call him that, but he's hungry. He's worried about is, like you said, is mama going to get attacked by daddy? Like some of our babies have real world life stuff going on that even as adults, we can't even manage sometimes. We don't, it's overwhelming for us. And so we look at their behavior and we want to just label them as a bad child, but investigate. Like Dr. Sonya was saying, have someone on your team who can look at that and recognize and do an assessment and can conceptualize what may be going on with this child. I think sometimes it's just so easy
And
for
a
our
lot,
kids to get discarded.
a lot of schools do have school social workers and school psychologists as well,
Yeah.
and guidance counselors utilize those resources within the school systems,
Yeah.
and then hopefully they can incorporate trainings into the programs and see how we could incorporate the parents as well.
Indeed, indeed, indeed.
Thank
I
you,
just
Dr. Julie, for that shout out. Dr. Julie is another doctor that I work
congratulations, Dr.
with.
Julie.
Congratulations.
I think that's so true. And that's another key piece, Charmaine, for your question. Get the parents involved as much as you can. We pull the parents in all the time because sometimes the emotional behavior and the behavior disruption is not the child.
Most
You know,
most times it's not
most
the child.
times it's not the child. So we pull the parents in and we hold the parents just as accountable.
Absolutely.
Just as accountable. if your child, because our program is free, if your child is going to be in this program, we require this of you. When we have our fundraisers for your child to do these things, we require you to sell tickets to our fundraisers. There's a requirement to your child being in this program. And so we hold parents accountable. We absolutely hold parents accountable.
Definitely. We got a comment from Takesha saying that she thinks school systems should invest in having teachers and school teams trained in youth mental health first aid, so educators are equipped to provide first aid until the child is able to get connected to a professional. And I definitely agree with that. I mean, we teach psychological first aid. So, I mean, we teach that to leaders, even in the military, where, I mean, they're still working with kids. 18 to 24-year-olds are ones that we see in the most issues with. So they're kids too, but teaching them to be able to spot problems and to get ahead of issues to provide support, like I said, until they can get connected with other resources. But those first line resources are there. The teachers, the custodial staff, those people that are in the schools every day touching these kids. It's important that they are empowered to make some type of change, some type of intervention with these kids and help them get connected to other resources.
Right. So, and can I just add, I see that Charmaine indicated that, they're doing mindfulness, trauma-informed care, healing circles, mental health first aid, but they're so overwhelmed. So as we know, healers need healing too.
Yes.
That part.
Okay.
That part.
So, providing that support for your staff too, I think is essential, because when you're thinking about having a mental health literacy on your campus, that includes not only the students, but their providers.
Yeah.
They need mental health days.
Wellness days.
Wellness days. They need retreats as well. There's so many different things that you can do. And not only in the school systems, Damon, you were talking about the mental health first aid. Everybody needs mental health first aid. Everybody out in the community needs to recognize if somebody is having an episode. Crisis intervention is another tool that people can learn. Police departments are incorporating it across the board. So that way, okay, if you're seeing somebody having a mental health crisis issue, then you don't pull out your gun. You talk to them, you try to diffuse and see what's going on with this individual versus that thinking that the person was a threat. And Damon and I used to work in the federal prisons together. We didn't have weapons. So when you have those clients who are having a mental health crisis, what do? You're going to have to use the power of talk to diffuse and bring that person down to a place where they're going to be able to hear you.
Yeah. You when you spoke about police, and oh my goodness, that's a whole nother conversation. We may have to come back, because police they have they have a feeling of threat too. That's why they pull their trigger quickly. Their trauma response. I mean, that's we're not going there right now. But
that'll be another healing conversation.
That's another conversation.
But I think that I that's so true, because they're running to danger
all the time.
So they have to be on alert. And I think we don't take that
not
into account.
Police officers, but firefighters, EMS, paramedics, first responders. My sisters are nurses, and they were learning mental health first aid a long time ago. And I'm like, that's great. Even working in the emergency room, you need to know, wherever you go, everybody should be aware of mental health first aid.
Yeah, these people are in a constant state of heightened arousal.
Yes.
They have to be ready. So it's no different from a police officer to someone that's in Iraq fighting. It's that they are just aroused all the time because they are worried about their health and safety. Absolutely. And that's just causing trauma. And so it's important that we are able to, as we move forward, just be able to provide resources for them to help them process what they're dealing with and find some growth through that, so they are able to make better decisions, because we need them. Regardless of how we feel, we need these people, because if someone breaks in your house, who are you going to call?
Right.
I'm calling the cops.
And let me just say this. I mean, and people don't have an understanding that from a neurobiological standpoint, when a person is experiencing trauma, their brain shifts every single time.
Yeah.
Every single time. So that means your executive functioning, your language, your perception, right? so many things are being impacted. So how a person responds is based upon their interaction, their frame of reference, how they are. So we have to pay attention to how we respond because everyone responds differently.
Yes.
And remember, I said adaptation or assimilation.
See, I'm taking it all in, Dr. Sonya.
Well, we want to start to wrap up because we have reached the end of our time, and we want to be good stewards of your time also. But I'm sure the panel will be considering another session at some point in the future. But I think it would be a good idea. It's been very good discussion this evening, very good topics, and just thank you all that have been participating in the comment section. Before we close, if the three of you have any closing remark you want to make before we close out, feel free.
Yes, be kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be so hard on you. Be kind to you. It's so easy to judge yourself by society standards or what you think you should be doing. Be kind to yourself. Where you are is where you are. Be kind to you.
Yeah.
I would say and a sense of community.
I would say be aware of what you're feeling in your body space. And also give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to do something different. Because in order for something to change, something has to change.
Great. Thank you all very much. Thank the panel. Thank everyone that participated in the comment section. Congratulations to all of the new doctors.
That's right.
That's amazing. That's excellence. That's growth.
Mm-hmm.
So we never can have enough of that. So we just thank you all for your time. You see some resources have been posted in the comment section, and feel free to reach out to the panel members if you have questions, concerns, or just want to continue the discussion.
Thank you, Damon, for being
Yes, thank you. Thank you for moderating
to do this, and he was willing, and I thank you. You did an excellent job, and we appreciate your guidance and the energy that you brought to the table.
My pleasure.
Indeed.
Do it again, Damon. Do it again. No.
No problem.
Can I just give this one resource because I didn't have time to put it in the chat. Guys, if you're experiencing, any kind of hardship, you can dial 211 in any city and get local resources. It's just like dialing 911. You just dial 211 and you can get local resources in any city. That's help with housing, that's help with utilities, that's help with food banks, that's help with mental health. If you're in crisis, you can dial 211 in any city.
Yeah. Thank you. That's such a good resource.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'll put it in the chat.
Great. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Have a good night, everyone.